Welcome back to episode 2 of my Canadian Highlander how-to series. Each week I'm bringing on accomplished pilots of a deck or deck archetype to talk about things like strengths, weaknesses, point spreads, deck building philosophy, even go over some sample hands of said deck or deck archetype, anything you might need to know whether you want to try the deck out or not. So without further ado, no series like this is complete without its guests, and I've got 2 really great guests on today to talk about our deck of this episode, Citadel Storm.
You can call me Goy, which is my screen name. I started playing at the beginning of 2025, so pretty recently. It's a while after Modern Horizons 3 had come out. So I'm pretty new to the format, I would say. I've been playing a little over a year at this point.
What made you want to check Canadian Highlander out?
A lack of competitive magic in my life. I was getting pretty disillusioned with Commander, and I wanted to try something different, and Modern was pretty terrible. Legacy was pretty terrible. So I thought, maybe this community is fun, and wow, it was a lot of fun.
Most people know me on Discord as Cyclops, so we'll just go with that. CYCLOPES. The 8 is not necessary.
The 8 is
whatever.
silent.
The 8 is silent, exactly. I actually had to look back because I forgot when MH2 was released. So I started playing right after MH2 released, so it's been about 5 years now. Yeah, it was funny. I actually got into the format because someone at my pre-release was looking for people to play Canadian Highlander, and I'd been aware of the format from Loading Ready Run, and I was like, sure, I'll play Canadian Highlander, and the rest is history, as they say.
How long have you been playing Citadel Storm?
I haven't been playing Citadel Storm for too long. I played it a few months after I joined the format, I think in that summer. But in that time, I picked up a lot of matches, and I've really grown to love it.
Very experienced with the deck despite the short amount of time. That's also great because it means your experience is pretty condensed into a more modern period for the deck, so to speak.
I started playing it in October of 2023, I think a month after Wild's Drain was printed because of Beseech the Mirror. And I think it's safe to say that I'm probably the creator of the archetype for Canadian Highlander, which is kind of wild because Citadel was printed in 2019, and I think most of the pieces pretty much already existed. So I guess I've been playing it almost 3 years now.
Would you consider Beseech the Mirror like necessarily the thing that put the deck together, or just more in the sense that you saw Beseech the Mirror and was like, oh, I could put this in this, and then it just kind of spiraled from there?
Beseech the Mirror was printed and it was really exciting. It's kind of hard to enable when you look at it because it needs artifacts. It was originally a lot closer to assembling the One Ring and Paradox engine and being more of like an Academy style deck. And then I realized, wow, Wolves of Citadel is a completely broken card. So no, I don't even think that Beseech is pivotal to the deck. I mean, it's extremely good in the deck. The puzzle of how do you solve having enough artifacts for Beseech was like, well, if I have all these artifacts for Beseech, I might as well have artifacts for Tinker.
What is Citadel Storm? How does this deck work?
At its core, Citadel Storm is what we call a manual storm deck, which means you're not assembling necessarily right away some like Lotus plus Brain Freeze combo, but you are sort of non-deterministically going through a storm line, and the main storm engine in your deck is Tinker for Bolus of Citadel. I would describe its plan as to Tinker for Citadel as fast as possible. Because it runs so many storm cards, there is a backup plan built into the deck using Yawgmoth's Will as the storm engine. So in scenarios where the Citadel is removed or your life total is too low, that's also an angle.
Something that makes this a little bit different than, say, like a Lotus Breach or a normal A plus B combo deck is that the cards you win with are not exactly the same every time. Obviously, you're going to want to Tinker for Citadel. It's in the name of the deck. You're going to see new cards all the time, and you're going to have to figure out how to sequence them so that you can get to a win. It's not as simple as saying, oh, well, I'm always going to do A leads into B, leads into C, leads into D. It's, no, A leads into 5 Bs, one of 5 Bs, which leads into one of 20 Cs, and then eventually you get to some F that is going to win the game. Tendrils of Agony is both really good to cast off of Citadel because it gets you life back to cast more things off of Citadel. It's also just like the most compact way to win, and that makes it sort of have this dual game plan of both storming with Citadel and also being able to do traditional Yawgmoth's Will lines.
Colin, some user kind of talked about this on the Lotus Storm video, that one of the benefits with combo decks that you have to look for on their backup combos is how well it can be incorporated into the main line. For here, as was mentioned, the Yawgmoth's Will line works in this deck as well because it's a plan B that can also allow you to storm off, but specifically the fact that things like Tendrils of Agony are a win con if you're trying to just manually storm, it's good in both circumstances. You could potentially make the decision point to go, well, this will gain me some life to keep going if you need to dig deeper.
With Tinker, like, there's so many ways you could think to take Tinker, like, oh, I'll Tinker, I'll get a Blightsteel Colossus, or I'll get some other big artifact. That puts a lot of burden on Tinker and doesn't necessarily have that same level of overlap.
I have experimented with backup Tinker targets in the past. Radiant Lotus is something I'm trying to experiment with right now. I've looked into trying to cover some of the harder matchups with tinkering for big robots. Most of the time, if Tinker is resolving, you're already winning the game. I mean, Bullets of Citadel is really that staggering in the deck.
Any additional comments they want to talk about in terms of the philosophy of the deck?
I think the biggest thing is that Citadel Storm is probably the fastest combo deck in the format on average. You don't want to dilute that with changes to the deck. You can add things that are more interactive and help you get there, but you really want to rely on the fact that your deck is so fast that it puts a lot of pressure on your opponents to find answers. And that doesn't necessarily mean that like my deck is, I'm always going for the turbo button where I'm trying to go as fast as possible, but it means that if you have the pressure for your deck to win super quickly and consistently, your opponent, they need to go for the force. They need to mull to force, they need to mull to a hate bear, whatever, because any normal, quote unquote normal hand is just not going to do enough against your deck. Side plan Bs are usually going to just hurt your speed and hurt your ability to fight through disruption.
I would call Citadel Storm the fastest deck before that huge consistency crater, kind of like on the edge of the cliff. I would also call it the most proactive deck, or at least that's a way I like to think about it. So my proactive plan as a Citadel Storm deck builder is stronger than every other proactive plan in the format. So I'm forcing my opponent to be reactive. And once you start to think about the deck that way, it sort of guides your decision making. So basically you want to include cards that will let you get to that resolved Tinker. It's almost similar to something like Flash Hulk. Your Flash, your Hulk, and then the rest is history, right? The deck has no fair juke or anything because that primary plan is so powerful that a lot of the cards you're going to want to include are just glue.
What would you consider the strengths of Citadel Storm to be?
The biggest strength is that you are really fast. You're the most consistently fast deck in the format because Tinker is effectively a one-card win condition. Tinker is also crazy easy to accelerate into. You can use Soul Mana, you can use Dark Ritual Mana, whatever you want to use. I've had a lot of turn 3s and even some turn 2s and turn 1s. If you are in a metagame where a lot of people are trying to be slow, Citadel Storm can just go way faster than anything. It looks really easy to win the game when you put it Citadel into play on turn 2, but sometimes you have to learn how to navigate around hate. You have to learn when am I going to pivot from Citadel to Will or vice versa. And because the deck operates on pretty thin margins, the better you get at the deck, the more you're rewarded.
In these segments, I try to cover stuff a little different from what Cyclops said. Like, basically, I'm going to have to agree that the biggest strength is you just go with that overwhelming amount of speed and you just knock people's socks off. Most matches of Canadian Highlander opponents are simply just not prepared for people to be threatening wins on turn 2 and 3, and you can take advantage of that for sure. The deck is also fairly resilient to graveyard hate, which is one of the main types of combo hate people bring. It's a complicated deck, which means your opponents sometimes don't know what's going on. They don't know the most important parts of your combo, how it works.
What are the weaknesses of Citadel Storm?
Reliance on life total. So that's going to be the most obvious weakness that Bolas' Citadel becomes a lot harder to win with. Not impossible, but so decks that can pressure your life total while also, disrupting your storm plan are going to be a really big problem. Citadel has very polarized matchups. So your matchups are usually either really good or really terrible. And there's not as many, there's some, but there's not as many middle of the road matchups. The deck is very punishing of your mistakes. If you make small mistakes, this is a deck that is going to make you pay for them in a really big way. The lines are not very forgiving. You're operating close to the abyss basically all the time. Also, like a factor in that is variance. So you combine all these things like difficult learning curve, high variance, very punishing of mistakes, and you can lead to a deck that is, for lack of a better word, pretty unfriendly and not for the faint of heart.
The weaknesses mainly are that you really need a really high tolerance for risk for playing Citadel. There's a lot of innate variance. Sometimes you'll play Citadel, you'll get your Tinker off, everything's going well, and then you hit land, and you're like, okay, I'll go next turn. Then you go land, and you're like, oh my gosh, this deck is terrible. And sometimes that's just going to happen. And then there's also like a lot of lines where you're not certain what's going to happen when you're doing things on Citadel, and you just have to take some risks sometimes. And if you don't have a high tolerance for risk, this deck is probably not for you. There's a pretty steep learning curve. When you're first starting out, the deck sometimes feels like you just can't get it to work. You need a lot of tolerance for risk because there's so much variance, and you really need to be playing at the top of your game because those little mistakes in other decks don't necessarily, ruin your ability to win. But in Citadel, you're operating on really thin margins.
This question has a couple obvious answers, I'll just say that. But what are some key cards in Citadel Storm?
I'm going to skip talking about Citadel, Tinker, and Tendrils. I think
Thanks.
those are pretty obvious why they're good. I really want to call out the inclusion of Profane Tutor, Noxious Revival, and specifically Doomsday. So Noxious Revival is a little unassuming. It looks like a card that just, puts a card on top of your library. But when you're Citadeling, the top of your library is where you get to cast spells for free. So anytime you see Noxious Revival, that is a free card you can put back on top of your library. It also makes you a lot better against hand attack. Basically, if you have a hand that has Noxious Revival, you're immune to one hand attack spell, which is really powerful. Profane Tutor is also one that is included in a lot of combo decks because it's sort of a bad demonic tutor. You suspend it on turn 2 and it goes off on turn 4. Because of the way Citadel works, you can cast it for free off of Citadel. And so this is just a 0 mana demonic tutor from Citadel, which is really, really powerful. And this all sort of dovetails with Doomsday. A lot of people see Doomsday in the deck now and they say, what are the Doomsday lines? I have Doomsday in my hand, I went to go cast it and I couldn't win. And the answer is that you're not supposed to cast Doomsday from your hand in this deck without Citadel in play. What it's really good for is that you can cast Doomsday and stack the top of your deck and just cast a bunch of stuff for free off of Citadel. The basic pile is Lion's Eye Diamond, Lotus Petal, Profane Tutor, Tendrils, and then Noxious Revival. Cast LED and Petal for 0 life because they cost 0 mana. You crack them for the 4 black mana that you need. You cast Profane Tutor for 0 life because it's a 0 drop. That puts Tendrils in your hand. You cast Tendrils, drain them for a bunch, and now Noxious Revival is on top of your library. Well, Doomsday puts itself in the graveyard. You can put Doomsday back on top, rebuild the entire pile, and that gives you infinite storm, infinite drain, etc. That's a really powerful interaction, and I want to credit Goyf actually for coming up with this.
As Cyclops mentioned, Doomsday is like a very unusual card in the deck. A lot of questions I get about Citadel Storm, like Cyclops said, what's the Doomsday pile? Well, you need Citadel in play first. It's really more of a combo piece, and Doomsday originally entered the deck as my replacement for Thought Lash, which was the old way, because when you're playing Citadel Storm and you have a card like Vampiric Tutor on top of your library, it's nice to have some kind of card that once you have it on top, you can cast off Citadel and you win the game. And that's what Thought Lash was for a very long time. Thought Lash was that solution. What it was mainly used for was to exile cards off the top until you find the right combination of life gain and a win condition, and then you execute that win. Problem with this card was how much life it costs. And how the deck evolved after Doomsday was a question I often ask, Citadel pilots, or I think every Citadel pilot should know the answer to this question is, how much life do you need to win after Doomsday? And the answer is 1. You do not need to spend a single point of life on your Citadel pile. Cyclops already went into detail on what that pile is. You can also use Yawgmoth's Will. There are a few replacements. But once you know that fundamental pile, the deck just really starts to tick. I would also like to shout out the fast mana sources in the deck. The Lion's Eye Diamonds, the Mana Vaults. These are really important cards in pivoting between the Storm line, the Will lines, and the Citadel line. And they point to an important principle, which is that mana is often very cheap to play off Citadel. Tutors are cheap, and cantrips are cheap, but spells can be expensive. It's important to use all your zones to the maximum effect. Maybe you pivot into a Will line. Maybe you pivot into doing something from your hand. And having access to these fast mana pieces like Mana Vault and Lion's Eye Diamond are a lot of what enables that.
Just want to check in to let you know that if you are enjoying this series, I would really appreciate it if you liked and potentially subscribed if you want to see more of this series or other content we do here on the channel. I also had to cut about half an hour of content out of this episode to cut it down to about the 20-25 minutes I like these episodes to be. And you can find that completely for free on my Patreon, link in the description below. Now back to your regularly scheduled. What are some potential new cards that are being tried or have been incorporated into the decks in the last few sets?
Starting Town was a nice improvement on a land. Tapping for colorless is really important to pay for signets and not always having to lose that life, which is obviously, more important in Citadel Storm than any other combo deck. Boomerang Basics from Avatar has been a card I've been really fond of because of the density of cheap little artifacts you can use to cycle it. And then it acts as your typical combo deck removal spell, removing any problematic Archon of Emeria or whatever stacks piece your opponent has in play. Stock Up's just a broken card. I've been experimenting, as I mentioned, with Radiant Lotus a little bit recently.
We've been trying out the Great Hall of the Biblioplex from Secrets of Strixhaven, and it's basically like Starting Town. There's basically, maybe 2 cards in the deck it doesn't cast. The thing about the Rainbow lands is that you really like being able to make any color, but having to always take damage for it, like with Mana Confluence or City of Brass, is just a no-go in a deck where you leverage your life total like Citadel. So the option to tap for colorless is so huge. I'm also personally trying out Erode from Secrets of Strixhaven. I differ from a lot of Citadel pilots. I like having more hard removal, and Erode is sort of like an upgrade to Path to Exile, or at least a sort of side grade. And that's because like hitting Planeswalkers is important. Things like Ashiok Dreammender. We just want a card that's a sorcery that's a ritual so that we can get a sorcery with Personal Tutor.
And instead you go, yippee, a rainbow land where I don't have to hurt myself.
Yeah, exactly.
They printed Cabal Ritual with no threshold, just Black Pyretic Ritual. Oh my god, I'd be over the moon.
What are some potential point spreads?
Well, obviously you need Tinker, because you need it for Citadel. And then Mystical Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, and Imperial Seal are all really, really strong because they're all 1 mana. They lead to some of the fastest starts because you can just go get Tinker really fast. They're also excellent with Citadel for obvious reasons. You're casting things off the top, these put things on top. And then I would actually say that Mana Vault is pretty core to the deck. It just bridges a lot of things, and I would say Mana Vault's pretty core. So that's 9 out of 10 points right there. We used to have a lot more wiggle room, but those pesky counselors keep pointing combo cards.
Who are those counselors that are pointing those cards, Cyclops? Man.
I hate all these counselors. I sure hope there isn't one around here.
Who those people are, but they've been pointing things. It's interesting. So the One Ring got pointed. I said in the beginning that actually the deck originally started with getting the One Ring plus Paradox Engine down. And we've cut Paradox Engine a long time ago, but Tor has been in the deck for forever. And most people are still on Tor. I think Goy still likes Tor a lot. I've actually been trying out cutting the One Ring, and I've been playing Balance as the last point.
I will be in agreement with Cyclops that, some months ago, this segment of the video would have been a lot longer. Gone are the days of Wishclaw Talisman, gone are the days of Tainted Pact, really long gone are the days of Ancient Tomb. Nowadays, Mystical Tutor and Imperial Seal and Vamp, the 3 top deck tutors, are too core to give up. The Mana Vault is really, really important. You have 1 flex point, and it's either Balance or Ring. I prefer Ring because I think it's really good in the control matchups. I mean, Balance is 2, but it's really, I think, at that point down to preference. Ring works really well with the artifact sort of synergies, and it just provides such an overwhelming tool versus control that right now I'm having a hard time giving it up.
Was the additional pointings to cards that Citadel Storm like to run, is that what really sort of tightened the deck down on what points it was running?
Those cards just were always in the deck. The rest of the options are just, they're not anything to write home about. Like, you'll play the Wishclaw Talisman. It'll do work. You're playing it because you just happen to have points. It's not something that's like amazing. We had extra points, and when you have extra points, having extra tutors is always good. We don't need them anymore.
It was always going to go down to these points. I think the most recent pointing, where you have to cut either Balance or the Ring, the one with the most actual choice, those cards were both really important.
What are some personal deck building choices and decisions that you're making?
So I've alluded to Radiant Lotus a few times. I still probably wouldn't recommend it to someone yet, but I think it has a lot of potential. I view it as basically a way to connect or thread the needle of this Tinker plan and the Yogg-Will plan a little bit further by allowing Tinker to be a huge ritual. I normally am not a fan of alternate Tinker targets. They're hard to cast off Citadel. They're expensive. Most of the time, they're not worth it. Oath of Druids is a bit of a pet card of mine. It appealed to me because Citadel is a very easy deck to make creatureless. I've experimented with a lot of Oath targets, from Atraxa for card advantage, Valgavoth, to just beat down with. I think the most unique one is Scholar of the Lost Trove. You can cast your Citadel, you can put a One Ring on the stack and get a protection trigger, or you can cast a tutor for Yawgmoth's Will, and now your graveyard's full because you just triggered Oath, so you can pretty easily present a win. There's some flexibility with that Oath the Druids idea, so I would say those 2 are the main ones.
The original deck was 4 color. It was 4 color, no red. I switched to Esper a long time ago, and I found the mana so much better. So I'm not like Goyf. I don't trust Oath of Druids, and you get to really leverage soul mana. The current spicy cards that I'm playing, and this might sound really boring, but I'm playing Impulse, Shimmer Possibility, and Thundertrap Trainer, which are not normally stock in the deck. 2 mana is obviously a lot more than 1 mana for a selection spell, but it's like Goy said, you just really want to find cards that glue the deck together. I'm trying to just find what I need, and I've been really liking them so far. Like I said, I'm playing Balance over the One Ring, which is, I think I'm the only person who's doing that right now. The control matchups are not the easiest, and the One Ring really helps there, but matchups like Death and Taxes, where they just slam a Hate Bear off of fast mana, can feel impossible when that happens, and Balance is a really good escape button for that. I'm also on more creature removal than most people. I'm playing Path to Exile, Swords, and the new Erode, because I really like having hard removal for creatures. Opponent doesn't have any creatures, and you see these cards off of Citadel, you cannot cast them. So there's sort of bricks on Citadel, but I've just found that being able to remove disruption pieces really helps me navigate to a win.
I'm going to show you both 3 hands. We're going to go through 3. One is into a blind opponent, and the other 2 are going to be on almost in a game 2 scenario. You know what your opponent's on at this point. We're going to go over these 3 hands and decide whether or not these hands might be a keep or a mole, and why. The first hand is Tundra, Conjurer's Bauble, Dark Petition, Mystical Tutor, Tendrils of Agony, Into the Floodmaw, and Gloomlake Verge.
I know this hand has an artifact and a top deck tutor. Into a blind opponent, this is kind of an ugly hand. The Tendrils is terrible. The Dark Petition doesn't really have any synergy with the rest of this hand. If I'm on like maybe the play, this hand does have the ability to present a win on turn 3 and remove a threat. So I think I'm regrettably keeping this, but it's not like extremely ideal.
I think I would agree that this is not an ideal hand. You have an Into the Floodmaw, which can deal with a disruptive piece. You have Artifact plus Mystical Tutor, which gets you Tinker. You also have Mystical Tutor, which can get you Dark Ritual, which can get you to Dark Petition. It is kind of slow, and it is definitely uncertain. You have no cantrips. The Tendrils is a dead card. Mystical is going to eat your draw step, so you really only have a draw step for Mystical Tutor. I think I would probably keep this in the blind, even though it's a little bit slow or sketchy.
For this hand, this is not a blind. You know you are up against Jund Midrange, and your hand is Undercity Sewers, Vampiric Tutor, Ponder, Preordain, Static Prison, Lotus Petal, and Sunset Revelry.
First of all, you have Ponder and Preordain, which get you pretty deep. You have Vampiric Tutor, which can get you somewhere over time. Sunset Revelry can buy you a lot of time. Static Prison buys you a lot of time. I actually kind of like this hand because you get to Surveil with the Undercity Sewer, and then you're going to Sculpt for a couple turns. Play Undercity Sewers, you play Lotus Petal, you can hold up Vampiric Tutor. This means that your hand is basically immune to hand attack, which is one of the main things that Jund is going to try to play against you. And you have a lot of selection to find what you need. Like, all you need is like Mana Vault, or you need to draw some more lands, and it's like, you have a lot of chances to get there. So I actually really like this hand.
I think this hand's actually pretty good. It has removal, it has a way to dodge hand attack, and it has the Sunset Revelry, which is going to buy you a lot of time. This one land is a Surveil land, which is sad because it enters tapped, but you also get a Look, and then you get a Ponder. You also have the Lotus Petal for acceleration. So this hand can defend itself, dig for what you need, which is basically just more lands. You're not necessarily always going to be able to keep a hand with everything that has the right amount of lands, a tutor, a payoff, an artifact, removal, everything. This hand is missing one thing, but it has the tools to dig for that. I think I would keep this.
You are up against Time Vault. So the hand for this is City of Traders, Grim Monolith, Hollowed Fountain, Undercity Sewers, Thoughtseize, Basic Island, Personal Tutor.
I'd keep this. And that might be surprising because it looks like maybe it doesn't have that much going on. If I'm knowing that I'm against Time Vault, they know they're against Citadel Storm. And a Time Vault player knows they cannot win against a Citadel Storm player in a race. That means that they're looking for a hand that can interact. And this hand is pretty good against a hand that interacts. You have the Surveil land, you have some mana, and you have a Thoughtseize, which can either take away their interaction or take away their own combo piece. I would like, ideally, a few more things to do with the mana, but I think I would keep this.
If it's on the play, I think it's definitely worth keeping. If you're on the play, you can try to do the whole Hallowed Fountain into Personal Tutor for Tinker right away. Just hope they don't have forces and try and jam a turn 2 Tinker. And on the draw, the Undercity Sewers is actually pretty rough because you don't get to Thoughtseize on turn 1. This hand just has so many lands in it, it's a little annoying. I think I would begrudgingly keep this, but if this were my 7, I might consider trying to go to a 6 because I just think that you're going to eat your draw step with Personal Tutor. Like, if you get the punch through with Thoughtseize, it's really good, but if you don't get that, like, this hand is not going anywhere.
Awesome. So now we're going to move on to the Shameless Plugs section, where both of you have taken a good amount of your time out of your day to come on and just talk to me and with me about this deck. So this is your opportunity now. If you've got projects, channels, social medias, anything that you want to plug here, now's your opportunity to do that.
I have a YouTube channel, Cyclops 8 Highlander. The 8 is not silent this time. I upload webcam gameplay, some Mitgo gameplay. I also do some theory videos, and I do want to sort of shout out, and I'm sure Goyf will mention this, we're both TOs. Come join the Discord server. We have an awesome community. You can play on all kinds of platforms. If you wanted to learn Citadel, that's where you can ask questions.
I don't have a YouTube channel or anything like that. Come play Canlander on the Discord. Come play Citadel. ask questions about Citadel. That's where I'm going to be around.
And the decks we're talking about today, Citadel Storm, its database list, the database, the winners archive, the Discord server, and any social medias that were mentioned here, like with Cyclops' channel, that will all be in the description down below in this video. So please feel free to check that out. As they both said, please give Canadian Highlander a shot. It is a really fun format, and there's a lot to look into and enjoy about it. Thank you both, Goyf and Cyclops, for joining me today to babble about Citadel Storm for over an hour at this point. I really appreciate both the time and the willingness to share what you know about the deck for any potential newer players.
Are we babbling or are we bobbling?
Ooh, that's tough.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you as well, Goyf.
Thank you.